And, his rhetoric is, of course,
terrifying.
Extreme.
His rhetoric is terrifying.
It's terrifying, but I think it's also indicative of what he's willing to do over the course of the next 12 months to make sure that Republicans retain the House.
I came across this older clip from Abby Phillip's CNN panel, and it's striking how much it still applies. The discussion centers on rhetoric from the president that many on the panel describe as extreme, even alarming, not just because of how it sounds, but because it's aimed directly at sitting members of Congress. What makes this moment important is the shift in focus from tone to intent. The panel isn't just reacting emotionally, they're asking what this kind of language signals about the next phase of politics. When threats start getting normalized, they don't stay rhetorical for long. They become a way to apply pressure and shape outcomes. Seeing Sam Seder back on the panel helps keep the conversation grounded. Rather than turning it into a partisan shouting match, the discussion stays centered on democratic norms and the consequences of leaders using fear as a political tool. That's what gives this clip lasting relevance. Let's get back into the video.
To Donald Trump's rhetoric, America is well rehearsed. There's been a decade of insults, provocations, controversies. You name the line and Trump has pretty much crossed it. But did he go too far this time? 6 Democrats released a video telling service members to disobey illegal orders. The president called them traitors. He said that they could be executed for seditious behavior. He even promoted another message that called for their hangings. One columnist says it's all a distraction from the bad news that he's been facing this week, from Epstein to the economy. Now, while that could most certainly be true, can it be ignored? Should it be ignored? Especially when those lawmakers say that his rhetoric is putting their lives actually in danger. After all, Trump and Republicans get angry when when Democrats, liken his behavior to a fascist or a dictator. But calling for the execution of political opponents fits the definition. And it's certainly more extreme than calling someone a descriptor. I mean, do you think that, I hear this sort of like, don't fall for the okie doke, he's just trying to distract you thing from Democrats a lot. Do you think this falls into that category, or is it something else?
Well, I mean, I think, frankly, you've got two sides that are preparing for perhaps what's going to happen over the course of the next year. Donald Trump's approval ratings are dismal. The Republican Party is on their back heels. They got destroyed, wiped out in a way that I haven't seen in 20 years in those elections 2 weeks ago. And so I think there's genuine concern amongst a lot of people in the country that Donald Trump is going to send in troops. He's already got these 500-person rapid response forces that are beginning to train and are going to be able to be deployed by spring. I think there's a lot of people who are concerned about what's going to happen over the course of the next 12 months in the run-up to the midterm elections. And I think the Democrats were trying to get out in front of that, and I think Donald Trump is trying to prevent them from getting out in front of it. And, his rhetoric is, of course,
terrifying.
Extreme.
His rhetoric is terrifying.
It's terrifying, but I think it's also indicative of what he's willing to do over the course of the next 12 months to make sure that Republicans retain the House.
No, I mean, but what do you mean? Do you mean in terms of actually following through on the threats, or what?
Well, I think there is a concern that Donald Trump is going to try and prevent the midterm elections from happening.
Okay, you're talking about these are the illegal orders.
Okay, that he's trying to, okay. But let's just talk about just what's happening right now and how we just think that he's planning ahead. What world do we live in when a president, it gives an idea that, yes, I think execution is okay for my political opponents? What world do we live in when we just ignore that and we don't talk about what that actually means? Because we're used to what he's done. He's numbed us. We're normalizing his behavior. I think that's really dangerous. And I think all of it, yes, it is a distraction. Yes, it is something for us to pay attention to. But how dangerous is it as we come off of a assassination of Charlie Kirk? How dangerous is it to hear him say this as if someone
the violence in this country is one-sided, and everyone knows it, right?
This is where the discussion becomes more serious, and for understandable reasons. The panel isn't just reacting to provocative language. They're questioning what it means when a president uses words that suggest punishment or severe consequences against political opponents. Even when framed rhetorically, that kind of language carries weight simply because of the office it comes from. What really stands out here is the concern about normalization. After years of confrontational and inflammatory remarks, there's a risk that extreme statements stop sounding extreme at all. The panel makes the point that just because something fits into a familiar pattern doesn't mean it should be dismissed. When people become accustomed to unusually harsh rhetoric, the bar for what feels alarming quietly moves. There's also an important timing element. This conversation is happening during a period of heightened political tension and public anxiety. In that environment, language matters more, not less. Even if some of this rhetoric functions as a distraction from other issues, that doesn't make it harmless. Words from leaders can influence behavior, expectations, and how people interpret events around them. The broader question being raised isn't about motives, but about responsibility. What does it say about our political culture if statements that once would have sparked immediate concern are now treated as routine? That's why this exchange is worth paying attention to. Not for shock value, but because it forces a closer look at how power, language, and accountability intersect. Let's get back to the video.
Trump is talking about is sedition, which is a law and order process. It goes, by the way, George Washington had generals who did insurrections put to death as well, right? So like, that's our first president that we ever had. Trump is.
Wait, hold on.
Let me just be clear.
Are you suggesting that Trump is right that these Democrats?
No, what I'm saying is that you guys are making the same mistake that you always do about Trump, which is that you're taking him literally instead of seriously. What he is obviously pointing out.
He's the president of the United States. I think it is warranted to take him quite literally.
But you fall for this game every time.
I'm sorry. He is not not candidate Trump anymore. It's President Trump.
What those Democrats are doing is absolutely treasonous. It's disloyal. They are causing division within the military. Who's issuing unlawful orders?
How is that treasonous?
How is his actions not the same type of normalizing of violent rhetoric that led to the assassinations that we've seen? That's come from DNR. I mean, we've seen.
Which are?
I'm saying
Democratic lawmakers in Minnesota were
the ones that were killed after the Medicaid wasn't expanded to illegal immigrants.
Hold on. Wait, excuse me?
It's just all.
This part of the panel is where the conversation starts slipping into, wait, what exactly are we arguing about here? Territory. One side insists the president's comments are being misunderstood, while the other keeps coming back to a very simple point. When you're the president, people tend to take your words a bit more seriously than if you were just arguing on cable news. What's actually getting lost in the noise is the original issue. The lawmakers weren't telling anyone to break rules. They were restating an existing legal principle that's been taught in the military for decades. That somehow turns into a debate about historical comparisons, intent versus tone, and whether everyone is being too literal or not literal enough, which is always a sign the conversation has gone sideways. And honestly, once we reach the point where George Washington is being casually name-dropped mid-argument, you can tell the discussion is drifting. That's usually when viewers at home are thinking, okay, but what does this mean right now? At its core, this exchange isn't really about history or hypotheticals. It's about how language lands when it comes from someone in power, and whether repeating the law should ever become controversial in the first place.
Are you saying that's okay?
No, I'm saying they were Democrats that killed them.
No,
this is not Republicans.
You don't know that.
No, that is
I'm sorry.
You do not know that.
To me because Charlie Kirk was actually a friend.
I understand
and to hear people talk about Donald Trump and Republicans inciting violence, it's just crazy.
The history of political violence in this country is not a Democrat story. That is factually inaccurate.
It is in the last 5 years.
No, it is in the last 1 year. One, single. Okay? This year, 2025, is the first and only year in the last 20 years where left-wing violence has exceeded right-wing violence. That is a fact. In the last 5 years, it's been 4 years, it's right-wing violence, 1 year left-wing violence. So you can have the aperture only be expanded to the last 10 months, but in the history of this modern political time, that is just not accurate. But even if it were, if Donald Trump thinks that there is a problem of political violence in this country, why on earth are comments like these acceptable to you?
Sedition is a lawful process. You have to be tried and convicted in a court of law. He's not encouraging people. He's not saying this is Hitler.
But hold on a second.
These people are fascists.
You actually believe that Democrats putting out a video saying follow the law is sedition?
Terrible. I think it was terrible.
You think that's sedition?
And look, we've already seen Democrats weaponize the government.
Terry, let me ask you a question. Do you think that Democrats putting out a video saying this is follow the law, don't follow illegal orders? Why do you need to tell people to
follow the law?
Do you think that is sedition?
Everyone in the military knows you need to follow the law.
It is a yes or no question. Is it sedition to tell people to follow the law?
I think Democrats have a long and standing history of undercutting and undermining the Constitution.
I'm just saying you're not willing to say yes or no because it's very obvious that the answer is no. Because if that were the case, it's a wink and a nod. That's the reason. Their words are perfectly. It's a perfect video, but it's a wink and a nod, and it's all meant to undermine the president of the United States. The military does not have a right to undermine the chief. Hold on a second. In this country, you do get to undermine the president of the United States.
Not if you're in the military.
No.
He's the commander-in-chief.
If you are a member of Congress, you absolutely, in this country, have a free right to undermine the president of the United States. You know that, right?
The commander-in-chief.
The argument that the Democrats were making in that video, because the fact is the military is not obligated to follow illegal orders.
Who's giving the illegal orders? Where are they? Give me the example of the
Democrats
illegal
were
orders.
saying specifically, you're not obligated to follow illegal orders.
Okay, then what illegal orders are they talking about?
Well,
they're just
in the future,
just in case.
In the yeah,
because you're
just in the case.
Because they're
right
all
now
crazy.
we have a
No
judge
one's gonna stop the
crazy.
midterms. No one's going to stop the midterms.
Trump's sending in.
Who just came up with the conspiracy theory that Republicans are going to stop the midterms? That's crazy. That's a conspiracy theory.
All right, we have to leave it there.
This exchange is a really good example of how political conversations today can spiral, not because the topic is complicated, but because the atmosphere around it is. On paper, what's being discussed here is actually very straightforward. Members of the military are legally required to follow lawful orders and refuse unlawful ones. That's not controversial. That's not partisan. That's not even new. It's been part of military doctrine, training, and international law for decades. But notice how quickly the conversation stops being about what the law says and starts being about what people think the law is being used to imply. Suddenly, we're no longer asking, is this true? We're asking, why are they saying this now? And once that shift happens, clarity tends to leave the room. What's interesting, and honestly a little ironic, is how difficult it becomes for some people to answer a very simple yes or no question. Is telling people to follow the law itself unlawful? That shouldn't be a brain teaser. Yet the discussion keeps looping around intent, tone, timing, and hypothetical future scenarios. It's like watching someone refuse to answer whether water is wet because they're worried about who poured it. This is where modern political debate often breaks down. Instead of engaging with a statement as it exists, we argue with a version of it that lives in our heads. A reminder of the law becomes a wink. A neutral principle becomes a signal. And suddenly, everyone's debating implications rather than facts. There's also a broader dynamic at play here. In a highly polarized environment, trust is low. And when trust is low, even basic statements can feel loaded. When people assume bad faith by default, no amount of clarification is ever enough. Everything sounds like a setup. Everything feels like a trap. And that's how conversations that should take 5 minutes end up taking an entire segment. If there's a bit of dark humor in all this, it's that the law itself hasn't changed. The rule hasn't changed. What's changed is how jumpy the political ecosystem has become. We're at a point where even saying, follow the rules, can spark a full-blown argument about motives, conspiracies, and intentions that may or may not exist. And that's why moments like this matter. Not because someone won the debate, but because they show how fragile public discourse can be when interpretation replaces substance. When people stop responding to what's said and start responding to what they fear might come next, the conversation stops being productive. Anyway, that's my take on this moment. If you found this breakdown useful and want more calm, clear commentary without the shouting matches, make sure you like the video and subscribe. It really helps the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.